I'm so excited for today's guest, Nedra Glover Tawwab. She just launched her book and it became a New York Times bestselling book overnight. Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Nedra, welcome to the show. I'm so excited. I need all your boundaries. I need all the advice.
Yay, New York Times bestseller. This is my first interview after that. So I'm super excited, or my first podcast interview. So I'm super excited. My energy is on a head.
I love it. No, I have the I have the chills for you. That is so hard to do. And it
Mhm.
just shows one, how excited people are to learn how to set boundaries in their life and that they're craving this. And then that they rallied around you in your work at a very important time for you in your life too.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful like culmination of everything that could happen. And that's how you end up on that list. And you just skyrocketed to the top of it too. So awesome.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm so excited about the reception of the book because it's something that we do need. And, I put up a post a little bit ago and was like, I needed this book 20 years ago when I was doing an audio book about 2 months ago. I was listening to it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need more boundaries here and here. So I was learning from the book. So I think it's one of these things that so many people would need. And until you read the book, you're like, okay, I thought I was okay, but actually I'm not.
So let's sort of start to unpack it. I obviously want everyone to get your book. I'm gonna get so much out of this interview. I already know it,
Hmm.
but putting it into practice and using the book is going to be obviously important for people. But you're this expert on boundaries in all types of relationships. Like, how did you get started in counseling in this area of expertise?
Mm. Well, I started to notice like a common thread among my clients, like these issues with boundaries and relationships, and we were seeing people place the blame on others or other external situations when there was some power in their behavior to change these situations, like burnout and your partner not listening to you and just all of these different things, where I was like, oh my gosh, like these are boundary issues. These are not necessarily like issues that people have, but sometimes relationships seem problematic when we haven't clearly stated what we want or need, or we're not honoring someone else's boundary.
I love that. So can you, in your words, define like what a boundary is and how do
Mhm.
we start implementing this in our life?
Yes. So a boundary is an expectation, a limitation, a parameter in relationships with yourself and others. We start to implement them by vocalizing the boundary, by saying, I want, I need, I expect, or we start to act in a boundaried manner. For example, managing your time. That is you being boundaried and saying, I will not add anything else to my calendar. That's something on your end that you can manage. So it's verbalizing something, or it is taking action in some way.
So when working with clients and all the work that you do, where do you see people fail at creating boundaries in their life the most?
Mm. Assuming that people know things. That's our biggest fail. We live in a society of common sense. And I remember like in elementary school, the poster that said like common sense is, everybody doesn't have it, or, some little poster about common sense. But I think it's one of those things that we think everybody knows what we know. And so we don't tell people because we assume that everyone is born with the knowledge that we have. Like people should just know that you should call before you come over. It's like, well, they don't know because they keep calling before they show up, or whatever that thing is. Like you need to tell people what you need. If you want people to call before they come, tell them. If you want people to give you a gift for your birthday, like if this is your expectation and you're going to be sad and upset and crying on your birthday because no one bought you anything, gently say to people, hey guys, it's my birthday. I'd love if you could buy me a gift if you could. Or this is what I plan to do on my birthday. Just being very assertive about the things that you want or need. Sometimes we are not, and we're expecting people to do things and they have no clue about what the expectation is.
It seems to be like a mismatch of expectation and people being able to meet those expectations if they're not mind readers.
Absolutely. You know, I think especially with couples, there's a lot of assuming around like, well, they should know what I want to do on my birthday. They should know that I'm busy and I need help with X. They should know that, you know, I'd like them to cook dinner. And people don't know. Like sometimes people can figure it out, but most often we have to say like, you know, hey, can you handle dinner today? And that just solves a big argument that you're having with yourself in your head about how this person is never helpful, how they should know better. And the person didn't even know that you weren't cooking. Like it's a huge miscommunication about what's happening. Just lay out an explanation. And from there, allow people to meet it or not. You know, back to the thing with the gifts. They don't have to buy you a gift, but at least maybe they should know that you're expecting one, because you're going to be mad at them for like something they didn't even know about. They're like, what happened?
Yeah.
I didn't know we were doing gifts.
Right. Right. And I think you're happier on even that in that uncomfortable moment of like trying not to be bossy or pushy or needy or I mean, can we talk about the expectation of like why it's hard to set boundaries or have clear communication with our partners and our friends and our family?
Yeah, I think it's hard to set boundaries because we are hyper concerned about how the other person may take it. And lots of times we create these stories and narratives in our heads about what they might say, how they might respond. And this could or couldn't be true. Perhaps you have set a boundary in the past and they responded away, but most of the time we haven't done anything and we just assume the worst case scenario, and it really stops us from being able to set boundaries with people.
I love it. So what do you suggest for your clients and the people that you work with, and the people who read your book? How can we begin to get in the habit of communicating appropriately and effectively and often with the people we love?
Yeah, I think sometimes we say too much, and so we overthink what the boundary is. I was, you know, chatting with someone earlier and they took about 15 minutes to tell me this story. And I said, what is the one sentence? What do you need? What do you expect? What's the boundary? And they said the one sentence. I was like, right. So you spent 15 minutes like talking about all of this backstory. And what happens is people are listening to all those details. They're feeling attacked, all of this stuff. And they're like, what is going on here? We need to communicate more clearly to people and not in a reactionary way all the time. Sometimes boundaries are preventative and you just tell people, this is coming up and this is what I expect. I will need your help with this in the future. On Tuesdays, can you blank? It doesn't have to be a reaction to something going wrong, but clearly communicating, one sentence, two max. This is the thing. I will not be able to help you with blank. I know you asked me to pick your kids up on Thursday, but I need to change that arrangement because now I have something going on. Most of the time we will tell a whole story. You know, I love the kids. They're so important to me. Picking them up is, you know, my greatest gift. They're just so cute, blah, blah, blah. We've talked for 10 minutes and we have not set a boundary.
Yeah.
You know, just tell people I cannot do this anymore. I would love to assist you for 2 more weeks until you're able to find some help.
Wow. And just clear and direct without the fluff.
I think the fluff is just so it can get really confusing sometimes, and it really mixes us up, you know, because you're talking and you're like, I don't even remember what I'm talking anymore. Where is the boundary in this? I'm just talking at this point through nervousness mostly because you're saying this really hard thing and you're waiting for this person to maybe figure out what you're wanting. And sometimes in those conversations, we walk away and we haven't set a boundary and we think we have. Just by talking about a problem, we like, okay, they've got it now. And it's like, no, the only thing you've said is it's difficult for you to pick them up. You didn't say you weren't going to do it anymore.
Right.
Like, they didn't get that you're not doing it. They just got, oh, this is difficult for you. Okay.
Yeah. And those poor cute kids are sitting on the curb with their backpacks.
What did you think about? Well, I told you. No, you didn't. You didn't tell me that. We were
Yeah.
talking about, flower backpacks, and, I don't know what happened in the conversation, but the boundary did not come up.
So interesting. So when working with clients, is it, I mean, obviously communication, open communication, talking about the things that are going wrong and all of that are important, but are you leading with boundaries?
Um, I think relationships ebb and flow, and we don't always have to place boundaries in certain places. Some people do just get our boundaries, especially, maybe some of the friends that you have or people you deeply connect with. You may have some of the same boundaries. So no, you don't have to just place boundaries because it is, something that you might foresee as an issue with a person. It's kind of a instruction manual on how to be in relationship with you. Or you could think of it as, if something happens that makes you feel uncomfortable, it can be, you sort of reshaping the interactions in the future by saying, hey, I understand that, sometimes you'll be late to things, but can you try to be on time, because this was a party that had a very clear start time and it pushed other things behind. So please try to show up promptly.
Yeah, I love that. It's very clear. So how can we start to set boundaries for ourselves to find peace?
Well, there are so many boundaries that we can set for ourselves. Before we started talking, you said you had 2 kids. I have 2 kids. One of my boundaries is to wake up at 5 a.m. before everyone in my house so I can have a morning routine that includes reading and writing, stretching, drinking my tea, filling my water bottle, just all of those very self-nourishing things. Because I notice when I don't do these things, mama be cranky.
Yeah.
And so my boundary for a peaceful day is to get up and be prepared to receive my family and to be engaged with their energy.
So interesting, because it does absolutely shift the day when we take care of ourselves first, put that oxygen mask on before helping others. And we carry so much of that burden as the matriarch of the family and the mom and the author, the practitioner. What do you, when you're working with clients, how important is it for them to, whether they have kids or not, to set a morning routine? And do you have advice for them on creating boundaries if getting up early is not working for them?
Well, I don't think everybody needs a morning routine. I think some people are night owls. And if that's the case, I would weigh more heavily on an evening routine and not a morning routine. I don't think we should force ourselves to wake up really early to be productive, because for some of us, productivity doesn't come until 12 p.m. or, different cycles. And so if you're the type of person that likes to sleep in, but at nighttime you have a boost of energy, that could be your reflection time. It doesn't have to be at 5 a.m. I listened to something the other day where Cardi B says she wakes up about 12 p.m. and her daughter wakes up about 3 p.m. But then I thought about like, oh, wow, they probably don't go to sleep till really late. Like she's a recording artist and, just studio, like all of these things. So their hours are different. So your schedule is going to be based on your life. And 5 a.m. may not be suitable for you. It may be 12 p.m. I don't know. But doing what works for you, not like, oh, everybody has to get up early, because I do feel like sometimes we feel that. Okay, so routine. I think a really good morning, evening, or afternoon routine includes some sort of quietness. That could be meditation. That could be stillness. I love journaling. I love it as a recommendation for people just to get things out, not as a reaction to things going bad. Because sometimes we journal, oh my gosh, I hate him. I can't believe, we're only journaling about pain. We could journal about hearing the birds chirping outside of our windows. We can journal about, I love this candle scent because, it doesn't have to be like this situation where you're reacting to some difficult feelings. It can be, but you can get creative about how to journal. I think meditating for a little bit can be good for you, and moving your body, whether that's going for a walk, stretching some, hopping on the treadmill, going to the gym, but just doing something to really nourish your body. And of course, drinking water. Waking up and just getting some sort of hydration out of the way is a really good way to start the day. So just having a very simple practice of tuning into yourself. Um, if you're not big on journaling, of course, reading is another very good practice. And it could be something short. You don't have to read chapters in a book. You could get a daily meditation book and just read like one page, but just something that's for you, where you're pouring into yourself.
I love that so much. I think they should start with your book. Can we talk a little bit about your New York Times bestselling book?
Yes.
And what inspired you to put pen to paper, and what readers can expect?
Well, what inspired me, of course, is my work with my clients and my life in practicing boundaries. I learned about boundaries when I went to therapy in college. I was in grad school, and it was suggested that any student becoming a therapist should talk to a therapist. So I said, okay, I go. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but turns out I was talking about relationships. You know, a therapist asks you 5 questions, and the next thing you're like, I don't have any issues. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I do. All right, you caught me. And so I started talking about like relationship things, and, you know, boundaries sort of came up. She told me about this book. And at that time, there's not, still, there's not a ton of stuff about boundaries. And so I read that book, and I thought the book was life changing. And I said, oh, okay, I'm going to implement. I felt more confident to implement some of this stuff. And as I started my work with clients, I noticed that they were having some similar issues in their relationships, really asking for what they needed, you know, coming from enmeshed families, being codependent, burnt out, all of these things, and really needing to set some boundaries with themselves. So from the beginning of my practice, I started to look at a lot of these issues through the scope of, wow, we need more assertiveness skills. We really have to work on being less passive aggressive and more assertive about our needs. And so that has been a lot of, you know, what I've practiced, in that, how do you say this? How do you say that? If that situation happened again, what could you say? So a lot of those sort of scenarios have come up in my practice with clients, and it's been very helpful, because sometimes, you know, things happen and we don't have the right words. And we're like, dang, I should have said this. And so we'll process like, okay, what happens the next time that, you know, this sort of thing comes up? With mental health, we often don't see a lack of boundaries as a cause for anxiety and depression, but it is. We put ourselves in situations we don't want to be in, which cause us to feel really anxious. And it becomes this like overwhelming thing. We start to avoid people, or we start to feel really worried about these interactions. Sometimes we become depressed because we feel powerless in changing these interactions. Now, of course, that is not the totality of depression and anxiety, but it can be a piece of it. And because I'm a relationship therapist, I've seen that connection where it's like, okay, let's talk about this interaction, because it seems like every time you're in this situation with this person, that's when the anxiety comes up. So how do we talk about this in this relationship in a way where you feel safe speaking up? You know, how do we, you know, empower you to ask for what you need, or take space, or whatever those things are that would make you feel better?
So interesting. So if someone is feeling unsafe with someone, or has that increase in anxiety when they are communicating with that person or in that person's space, what's the first step in determining whether you need to be assertive and create a boundary or take some space? And what's some an example of how you might coach a client through that?
Mm. Well, really, I don't consider it coaching because I like people to do what feels comfortable for them, because what I feel comfortable with may be different for you. And so we talk about what feels comfortable for you. People typically already have the answers, and I just need to listen and ask key questions to help them get them out. So people usually come to me with a problem, and I ask a few questions and say, "Oh, it sounds like you've already worked it out." And they're like, I guess I did. It's like, yeah, like you had all the answers. You just needed to be your own sounding board. You needed me to help you, maybe get a little more clear. But we know when we don't want to be in relationship with someone, it's really hard to say that. So a part of my job is encouraging you to say the hard things. Like, what are you not saying about this relationship? And most people will be honest and say that I don't need to be in it. Okay. Well, I didn't say anything. You said that. So what do you want to do about that? Are you ready right now to not be in it? Or do you think this will be a process to get out of it? And most people go for the process route because it's really hard to end relationships even when they're unhealthy for us. It's really hard to stay in unhealthy relationships even when they're unhealthy for us. So it's a interesting dynamic because we all want to be in healthy relationships. And sometimes, depending on who the relationship is with, we don't feel like we can advocate with this person, particularly with family. It's really hard to reshape patterns that have been going on for years and years.
Yeah. What are some patterns that may be destructive or keep people from speaking up that you see in some of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, codependency, enmeshment, childhood abuse where parents still have some authority in the adult's life, overbearing parents sometimes, parents who have who are well-intentioned, but who are really directing their adult child's life. So I've had a lot of clients who are becoming adults, and we can become adults at 20, 30, 40, 50, but it's really you become an adult when you can set those boundaries with your parents. And some folks are still really working on that, and saying like, this is what I want to do for the holiday, or this is my child, this is our expectation for this child. So people are still very much struggling with what it looks like to be an adult child.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I come from a loving family with loving parents, and, we all get together for the holidays, but it is going to be important for me that my boys are able to set boundaries with me, and that I'm not setting this expectation that just because they're my child, that they are expected to do everything that I say until their 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. How do we, and I want to kind of unpack some of the codependency and overbearing parents and all of that, but how do you parent your children so that they know how to set boundaries and that they aren't taking this into their adult life?
I feel like my kids, I feel like most kids, my kids, your kids, they're already pretty clear about their boundaries. I think the question is, how do we honor the boundaries that they already have? Kids know what they like to eat, what they hate to wear, who can touch them, who they don't like. They're super clear about this stuff. Now, we can honor those things or we can dismiss them. We can encourage them to be like we want them to be, or we can encourage them to be like themselves. And so I'm not teaching my kids really any boundaries about themselves other than this is your private part. This is, but a lot of the boundaries that they have, they've come up with on their own. I don't want to eat this. I don't want to wear jeans. I'd rather stay with you than go blank. Like these are already things that they're coming up with. And I'm just saying, okay, well, if that's your thing, if it's reasonable, then I can honor it. Some things aren't reasonable. You can't eat chicken nuggets every single day. I have to throw some, I have to throw some broccoli on there. I know you love to drink almond milk all day, but please have a glass of water, so So there are some things that can't be unreasonable, but for reasonable boundaries, like, I don't want so-and-so kissing me in the face. It's like, okay, I understand that it's your face. Yeah. And they shouldn't. I want you to understand that what feels uncomfortable in your body is okay. That's okay. And that's good recognition. So, I'm a social worker, so I'm all about like, body consciousness and, what do you feel and that sort of thing. So, if that's your rule, then that's your rule.
I love that. Just honoring the boundaries that they're already setting for themselves and helping them recognize what those are and hold tight to those. That's so good. You said codependency and then enmeshment. Can you explain what these are and how boundaries can help?
So codependency is when we are enabling unhealthy behaviors in others. And enmeshment is when there is no difference between us and someone else. And if there are any differences, there's conflict, right? So in both of those relationships, typically when people are in codependent relationships, they feel extremely bad for setting boundaries. Basically, you can't have any in a codependent relationship, because then that would mean that you're advocating for yourself and pushing against this person or this system. And the same thing really with enmeshment, like, everybody sort of has to think the same and be on the same program. And if that isn't the case, it is threatening. It's like everybody in this house wears a ponytail, and now you want to wear your hair with curls. It's like, what is going on here? It's like, curls are okay. They're not harmful to anyone. No one has been harmed in the process of curling my hair, right? Like everything is good here. It's okay if we're different. It's not unreasonable. But for enmeshed families, it is like, oh my gosh, she's the one with curl. It's like, how did they break away from us? It's seen as threatening because it's different, and really it's not. It's just curls. It's safe. It's safe. And so with families who have those sort of dynamics, is really about helping them to become more of themselves, because we all have our individual personality that is influenced by the group that we're in, but there is something a little bit different about us, right? And it's okay to be that bit of difference and to have some commonalities among people, but to also be able to be yourself. It doesn't have to be exactly like anyone else.
I love that so much. And what do you see for people who are in these relationships that are codependent or in enmeshment? Enmeshed together, just like the same human, everyone's on the same page. How can setting boundaries, I mean, it seems just sort of like destructive that you aren't your own person. Well, what have you seen in your work in regards to what are the healthiest ways that people can start to set those boundaries if they're realizing when they're listening, in their car right now to this podcast, like, oh, this is definitely me. I feel uncomfortable setting boundaries. How do we start? Like,
think of what you want the most in that relationship and really communicate that to the other person, or hold the boundary with yourself.
So what's an example of holding a boundary with yourself?
Let's say that you have a family member that calls you every day at 5 o'clock and complains about every single thing in your life. Holding the boundary for yourself could be, I feel depleted when I hear this. I don't know if I want to talk to them every day, and proceeding to not talking to them every day and really figuring out a schedule that works for you. Because sometimes we can't make people stop complaining. We can't make them do anything, really. But even requesting is sometimes like, hey, I see you're like always energetically charged around 5 o'clock when you call, and you can say that to people, and sometimes they'll listen and sometimes they won't. So if they're not willing to, how do you change the pattern on your end? You have the power to not answer your phone. You have the power to speak to them every other day if that's what, feels better for you energetically. You have the power to honor your boundary without even including them in the boundary.
I love that. So how do we start to look at our life and set these boundaries and try to figure out like where we need boundaries? How do we assess that?
Your feelings. We know when we feel uncomfortable. We know when we're frustrated, anxious, confused, burnt out, upset. We feel something. We have to be more in tune with our feelings. Lots of times we bypass it, we dismiss it, we say it's silly. I shouldn't feel this way. Well, if you're feeling anxious, it seems like something is going on where your body is saying you should feel this way. Why is your body saying that? Is it this person? Is there something in this interaction? How do you communicate that and not ignore it? Because the anxiety won't go away by avoiding it. Neither will the discomfort, the sadness, the frustration, the burnout. You cannot ignore these things. They only get worse with time when we're trying to ignore them or dismiss them. So addressing it is actually a very healthy way to say, I want to be well.
I love that. You talk a lot about burnout, and obviously burnout is not it's not a place of wellness. Mm-hmm. How can we all prevent this burnout, and where do you see it most with your clients?
Work-life balance. And I think that's because we have in our head that we can do more than what we actually can do. And so we like to be everything to everyone, and, super mom, super friend, super partner, super yoga person, super all of this stuff. And you cannot be super in all areas in real life. And so in doing that, we overload ourselves. We say yes to too much and not no to enough. We add things to our schedule. We overcommit. There are so many things that we do just to be liked, to please others. And it's really harming us. And sometimes we just can't do those things. And sometimes, it is harmful to us to do those things. And we continue to do it because in our head, we should be able to. There are so many books about, like work-life balance, how to achieve the perfect work-life balance. And this is how you cook to make work-life balance better. And this is how you do this to make work-life balance better. And really, I think at some point, you just got to get some takeout and say, I'm not cooking today, And this is really what most of the books end up saying. Like you have to find a shortcut because there's no way to do all of the things. So here are a bunch of shortcuts.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to really manage all find 30 recipes and, cook from the 30, So there's really no way to do all of the things that we add on our plate. And we have to know that it's okay to ask for help. We have to be in a position where we are comfortable receiving help. We have to be able to tell people no when we need to. We can say yes when we need to as well. But to really prevent burnout, we have to be aware of what our boundaries are. Some things are just too much. How do we say that?
Yeah, it's so true. That resonates so strongly with me as a full-time working mom, wife. There's so much guilt surrounding not giving your all to all of it, but it's a hard thing to balance. What if someone is struggling with that? What suggestions do you have for like releasing the guilt and really making sure that they're honoring what is most important to them?
So I think we have to move through guilt. And what I mean by that is we have to act while guilty. We act when we're feeling anything else. When we're, happy, we continue on with life. If we're sad, most of us get up and go to work, So if you're feeling guilt, is not a reason to not proceed with doing something. It's a feeling, and it may be part of the process. And at the end of it, you still feel really proud of yourself, therefore erasing the guilt that you've experienced from having to do this thing, right? And so guilt is not a reason to stop. And we have to reprogram our thinking to consider that maybe we aren't bad people for wanting to be healthy. Maybe we aren't bad people for wanting boundaries in our relationships.
Love that. Are there things that you see mothers women, working professionals do that, that you think is a common thing? Like, I'm thinking you just said feeling guilty for wanting to be healthy. Like, as a working full-time working mom and wife, like taking that time to work out does make me feel guilty, because I do feel like I should be redirecting that time. When do we, and like, how do we rank and work with setting boundaries and knowing which boundaries are the most important? Because I feel like it'd be easy to say, like, I need my hour of working out and I need this and I need that. And to expect a lot once I figure out what all these boundaries are that I need.
I think they're all important. We don't have to rank them. We have to figure out a way to have some sort of boundary harmony and allow all of them to exist. You do need to work out. Also, you do need time with your friends. Also, you do need to drink your water. And of course, some of those things are more pressing than others in any given moment, but I don't know if they'll all get equal timing of you. You're not going to be able to dedicate equal parts of yourself to all of those things. And so you have to figure out some ways some weeks you might be really good at the friendship thing. And, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't called her in 2 months. You're not a terrible person. You're a human. You can't manage it all. And you call them when you think of it and say, oh my gosh, 2 months went by. So you do what you can without beating yourself up about it.
I love that. Well, let's kind of break down. You are a mom of two young boys, and I'm a mom of two. Sorry.
I was about to say, I don't have any boys.
Well, yeah.
Well, I have a dog, Cooper. He's a boy.
Yeah, there you go. I want to kind of go through the places in which boundaries are important in your home, in the office, and with yourself. What would you say are like your non-negotiable boundaries in each one of those places?
For this hypothetical you with 2 boys?
Yeah, for this hypothetical me with 2 boys.
It's tough. I don't like to give people boundaries because it's going to be different for everyone. Like, some people would say, like, I do not work on the weekends. And some people are like, I don't mind working on the weekends. It doesn't disrupt anything else. I feel fine. I'm not overwhelmed by it. So it's hard to say that not working on the weekend should be a boundary. It's like, I don't know. Like, how does it feel? Because the boundary is based on how you feel about something. It's based on if you can handle it, if it's disrupting other things. If you're checking emails on the weekend, is it disrupting your family time? So I would just be mindful of how things are already flowing in those areas, because what's disruptive and not working. When you're trying to get through a morning routine with your kids and it's chaotic and frustrating, that's where you need boundaries, where those areas where it's like, okay, this is not working. So I would say, look at the areas that, just aren't working for you right now, and really creating the boundaries from there, because it may not be boundaries that I would, even think of for those areas.
I love it. Finding those pain points and setting boundaries to alleviate the pain, it sounds like. So before we wrap up today, I want to make sure that I have a general idea and that the audience has a really strong grasp of your new book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Is there any tips that you have that come to mind from the book that you just think are absolute game changers for people?
Do not assume that people know what you need, even if you've known them for all of your life, even if you're married to them, even if you're in a long-term friendship relationship with them. Do not assume that they know what you need and they already know your boundaries. Also, don't be afraid to change your boundaries. You could have accepted something or been, some sort of way for 20 years. And if you want to change it today, you can change it today. The other thing is, understand that guilt may be a part of the process. Is not anything that you have to get rid of to be able to set a boundary. And then number 4 is just be very clear about what the boundary is. Instead of talking about all of the problems in the relationship, really focus in on what you need, what is the solution, because that typically will lead you to what the boundary is.
I love it so much. I kind of want to go back after this podcast and look at my life, start setting some boundaries, and have Chris do the same. I think it's definitely going to just clarify the communication and what we need and make us both happier and, keep us as independent, whole individuals outside of one another without needing to be codependent.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people follow along on Instagram? Where can they buy the book?
The book is available everywhere books are sold. I am most present on Instagram, and on there I am Nedra Tawwab.
I love it. I follow along and it is game changing. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Have a great day.